especially with the forest treatments. I was kind of blown away with the response. And one of the stands, I bet they were 90%. That would be the number I'd throw out. 90% understory coverage of forbs.
Welcome to Wild Turkey Science, a podcast made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow. I'm Dr. Marcus Lashley, Professor of Wildlife Ecology at the University of Florida.
And I'm Dr. Will Gulsby, Professor of Wildlife Ecology and Management at Auburn University. We're both lifelong hunters and devoted scientists who are passionate about hunting, managing, and researching wild turkeys.
In this podcast, we'll explore turkey research, speak to the experts in the field, and address the difficult questions related to wild turkey ecology and management.
Our goal
is to serve as your connection to wild turkey science.
Is that your attempt at a yelp or what?
No, not at all. That's my Tin Man Rusty sound.
That's the squeaky wheel. It's been a little while since we've recorded, y'all, so we gotta shake the rust off.
A minute. We got a lot going on, man. I mean,
yeah, we do. The other thing that I was thinking, I meant to say this right before we started, but we were talking about what we were gonna talk about today, and one of the thoughts that occurred to me is yesterday I was meeting with one of my graduate students, and we were talking about his graduate research proposal. This is something that all master's and PhD students have to do, early on in the initiation of their graduate research. To basically, it's like a planning document, right, and a literature review, so that they're very informed on the topic and they kind of lay out where their project fits within that greater literature. And first of all, I find it more and more common that I go back to our episodes as kind of a repository of literature. I mean, they have turned into a great resource to where I can pull up the Libsyn page and I can just like search for various topics and go back. Oh, we did an episode on that, and here's 6 articles that we cited in that episode that you can go to build out your lit review. So that's been a super useful tool.
It's funny you bring that up because I've had multiple interactions with folks in my lab or in other labs even.
Yeah.
With students I'm on their committee or whatever, where they have come prepared because they went and found an episode that had some literature, and they were like, well, I heard you talk about this.
Yeah.
And, this is kind of what I was thinking, and that really helped me think through this part or whatever.
Yeah. The specific example yesterday was that I told this student that some of his literature review needs to talk about the mesification of the southeastern landscape and what that's done for mesocarnivores and how that could in turn affect turkey populations. And I was like, here's 2 episodes with citations and links that directly discuss that, because it was a topic that he was previously completely uninformed on. And I mean, what a valuable resource. But my other point that I was going to make to come full circle on this was that as I was scrolling back through some of those older episodes, I realized there are a lot of really relevant topics that we haven't talked about in a long time. And so we might need to circle back to some of those eventually. Yeah,
no, I think that's important. And we have done that to some degree.
Yeah.
Some of it, we also realize a lot of our audience now was not the same audience when we started.
Yeah.
So some of those episodes, people may not be going and starting this from the beginning. And
we'll get I'll get an episode request and I'll reply and say, oh, look, we did a whole series on this just the other day. And then I go back and I look through the episodes and, it was like a year and a half ago.
Yeah. So, we had a couple of episodes that we thought were particularly relevant to this time of the year. And also you and I both have had a bunch going on.
You're right.
So we did, put some of those back in the hopper, so to speak. But, today I think we're going to go into one of those kinds of topics again that we've done before. And this time we're recording another episode because you and I, one of the reasons that it's challenging for us to record at this time of the year, because we're both doing a lot of site visits.
Yeah.
So we're also gaining more experience and seeing more situations and getting feedback on how things worked or didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have, we've reached a point where we're ready to go back to some of the problems that we're seeing on landowners, that we're visiting with. And I think that'd be a great timing of the topic, because right now is also a pretty good time. I know it's hot.
Yeah.
But, jumping side by side and ride around, and you can identify some problems and do some planning, to try to remedy some of those situations in the future.
Yeah, I feel like we always end up having one of these episodes around this June, July time frame, which, I mean, it makes sense. This time of year, a lot of folks are thinking about this type of stuff, and we're actually living it. So,
yeah. So, between that and the fundraising and everything, it's been a real whirlwind. But I'm excited to sit down with you and talk through this. And
I wish professors had summers off. It seems like everybody always thinks we do.
Yeah. Oh, you must. What do you even do during the summer since you're not teaching? It's like, well,
everything that we
teach
can't
most of the year.
Well, I teach more than you, but I mean, so my answer to that question is everything that I don't have time to get done when I am teaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we go and collect data, so that has to happen sometime.
Mm-hmm.
We also try to disseminate that data, which obviously we're doing that right here, but we also do that in a lot of other ways. We also try to go and individually work with people, and that takes time.
Yeah.
So you start stacking them up.
And oh, by the way, I'd like to spend a little time with my family in the summer too.
Yeah. I've also added fundraiser to my portfolio now.
Yeah.
So, it's intense. But we're back.
I'm going to start calling you development officer. You're a development officer now.
Well, I mean, we've got to do something.
Yeah.
It makes our traditional sources of funding they're not holding up. So,
right.
If people want us to continue doing it, we're going to have to do it through fundraising. So
that's right.
That's just the way it is.
So back to our relevant topic, the things that we've been seeing and what we've learned this summer working with private landowners. One of the things that I feel like has been interesting for me compared to when I first started doing this stuff 10, 15 years ago is that I do feel like in general, a lot more landowners are well informed about timber management and prescribed burning than they used to be. So
that's a similar initial thing that I wanted to say. Very similar to what you just said. Where landowners are at when I show up now is usually much better than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, 10 years ago, I felt like most of the time you would show up and none of their woods had been thinned or burned. And so we're starting at a very baseline level of like we have some really low-hanging fruit things that we got to take care of.
Yeah, that you can have a massive effect real fast.
Right. Now, that being said, one of the things that I typically find related to just thinning and burning is that a lot of landowners aren't burning quite as frequently as I would like for them to.
Yeah. Part of that, and I think we've said this in different ways and on the air many times, part of that is because how frequently we should burn, the recommendation is changing.
Yeah. It used to be widely accepted that if you were managing southern yellow pine plantations for wildlife, I hold, throw up quotes because that's a really ill-defined objective. But if you were burning southern yellow pine plantations for wildlife, you burned every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was the dogma for decades, probably.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was what I learned. That was the textbook. 3 to 5 year interval. It's like a canned response. Oh, if you want quail, bump that down to 2 to 3.
Right.
And, thin, so you get some sunlight in the woods, but there's not a target basal area necessarily.
Yeah.
Just thin it.
Yeah.
Thin and burn.
Right.
And you solve all the problems.
Yeah.
Which I will say, if you do those two things, you get a long ways.
Yeah, you do.
Like that is a big piece of the pie.
Right.
in the South at least.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, that's the way we learned it in school.
Right.
It seemed like it was just settled. That's just what you do.
Exactly. But fast forwarding to now, rarely do I ever recommend a fire return interval longer than 2 years on a property where turkeys are the number one management objective.
Yeah. I'd say that's pretty accurate. And, to give some context of where neither of us do a lot in the North.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be, when you have shorter growing seasons and,
sure.
And, things aren't succeeding as fast.
Right.
Because of that would be a place, or if you're not getting enough rainfall, or something I deal with more commonly now in Florida is we have sites that are so unproductive, like it's
deep
just
sandy
sand.
soil. Yeah.
Yeah. The vegetation, you just get longer to respond to the succession of plants. You're able to lengthen it out in some cases.
Yeah.
Or might want to,
right?
Especially if you have deer as an objective. Also.
Yeah, and some of that's a very good point of clarification to make. And for example, I visited with a landowner yesterday, and they also have a secondary deer objective. They're not as high ranking as turkeys, but there are going to be some portions of the property that are burned on a little bit longer return interval, so that we're maximizing the year-round deer forage in those areas, as well as strategically placing cover so that we can, set up basically ambush sites between cover and forage that they're designing on their property.
Well, I've had two that I have met with in the past month. And it's almost like they, when they're coming to us, they're usually turkey number one, but both of us have done a ton of deer work too. And that, know, that some of the landowners have a really strong deer interest. Usually
almost all
that's
of them
number
hunt
two.
Deer. Yeah.
Yeah. Usually it's not the priority for us, but it is for a lot of landowners. It's just not usually Bronson or somebody else is dealing with those landowners.
Right.
But I don't know. I just get the kind of the impression that I need to reassure them, like it's okay for you to have an objective for deer and turkey.
I do. That's funny you bring that up, because I feel like a lot of landowners are apologetic that they care about deer when I come out.
They're trying to justify, well, I got this one on a little longer because, I want it to be good bedding cover because I've got this food plot here and I can, it's like, that's okay. Every square inch of the property doesn't need to be ideal for nesting and brooding cover.
Yeah. I think that's an important takeaway for us to mention today, or at least the takeaway that I get from it. Yours may be a little bit different, but it's that a landowner should never apologize for their objectives. Yeah.
Like your objectives are what you want to do, and that's fine.
And
I try to reassure sometimes, like, let's say you got 1,000 acres and you're really into turkeys. That doesn't mean all 1,000 acres needs to be trying to maximize turkeys. Some landowners want to do that.
Right.
And guess what? You're still going to have a lot of deer.
Yeah.
That's, they're going to be there.
Right.
But you might want to take a couple hundred acres of that strategically around the property and set it up to make your huntability for deer better, or your productivity for deer better, or both. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Nothing at all. That's completely dependent on what you want to do with your land. And, I just kind of find it interesting, like people are apologizing.
Yeah.
The other thing I get apologies about,
and it makes me wonder, like, why do they feel like they have to do that? Is it because they've worked with other like forestry and wildlife professionals that
I don't know
they guilt them over that, or I don't know where that comes from.
I don't know. I think the other thing I was going to say right there, the other thing I get apologies about is anytime we say ryegrass.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one is from us.
Yeah. Well,
I know I got to take care of this ryegrass. So.
The other thing that I've noticed too is people are very apologetic when we go out and go past a feeder.
Oh yeah, that's another one that's very common. Although I will say, and I'm not going to attribute this to us, but I have noticed it more recently. More landowners do not have any feeders on their property. I've gone on several here lately that don't have any.
Right. Yeah.
And they are very clear that that's, that they do not want them on their property. So,
right.
Which I've been impressed with. And you know what? They still got tons of deer and turkeys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like they're still meeting their management objectives and having a really great hunting experience without pouring feed out everywhere.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I feel like a lot of landowners are doing better with thinning and burning. Maybe not burning at quite the frequency we would normally recommend.
The other thing I would add into that, they're also much more aggressive with using herbicide strategically to deal with their problems.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that.
That is a big change.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. They're understanding the value that herbicide can play in restoring conditions back to what we want from a composition and structure perspective for turkeys.
Yeah.
And then understanding that once they do that restoration step, which is oftentimes very intensive and costly, that it turns into a longer term, the maintenance is a lot easier than the restoration.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I see arguments about this, and sometimes they're directed at us online. There's a group of people that are completely anti-herbicide.
Right.
And there's probably the opposite extreme also. And then to me, there's a lot of slack in the middle.
I know where you're going.
And I'm in that slack where we got some problems or some scales of a problem where that's really the only good option.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not viewing it as we're going to do this forever. We're just going to go willy-nilly out and spray herbicide everywhere.
No.
I'm never viewing it that way. I'm trying to quickly solve a problem and get it into a maintenance level that you don't need to use that tool anymore.
Yes. And this is something that I really emphasize in my habitat management class with wildlife biology students, is that because a lot of them come in the same way, and they're either anti-herbicide or they're very cautious around the idea
which I think
of using herbicide.
A reasonable amount of caution is warranted.
Yeah. But what they have to realize, I would love it if we could just use natural processes to get where we need to get for certain species objectives like turkeys. But the problem with that is that almost every ecosystem that we work in any longer is so degraded and so affected by years of lack of management or a lack of disturbance or even the introduction of new species from elsewhere that's almost impossible anymore, right? It's not
super rare.
You're not just going to use natural processes like fire to get back to where you need to. If you've got a huge problem with Japanese climbing fern or Kogan grass or Sericea lespedeza or any of those other really problematic species.
Yep. Microstegium.
We could go on and on.
Yeah. Kudzu. Oh man.
So I think they're appreciating that a lot more. I think we're learning a lot more about what herbicides at what rates are most effective at achieving the desired vegetation conditions as well.
Yeah. I definitely have grown an appreciation for some of the mid-rotation treatments in particular.
Yeah.
I was mentioning to you, I know you had a project on this, and I think I even maybe called you or texted you about this and got some information from you about it.
Yeah, we're about to start publishing on that work right now.
Yeah.
Those manuscripts are in prep.
Oh, great. That's important data for sure. But I have seen a couple of stands in different contexts and fields.
Yeah.
Where escort had been added to the mixture or used as a treatment. And especially with the forest treatments, I was kind of blown away with the response.
I know. And I'm so glad that you've finally seen this, because it's something you and I have been kicking back and forth for a long time now.
Yeah.
And I understand why you kind of had a certain level of disbelief that Arsenal plus Escort would not be too hard on the Forb community, especially.
Yeah, because it's a herbaceous
Yeah, that's what it's designed
release.
to do.
But I've seen it in two contexts. Both landowners were using it because of blackberry walls.
Yep.
Basically, they had thinned, and they got taken over by blackberry. They were using frequent fire in open forest conditions, but it was kind of more about the huntability problem. Like the gobbler won't come through the fifth row because it's a big wall of blackberry.
And that's a common problem when you use an Arsenal-only mid-rotation herbicide application.
Right. So they were in good shape structurally for the most part.
Yeah.
And with hardwood control and everything.
Yeah.
But they're trying to deal with the blackberry situation, and they had added the Escort application, and one of the stands, I bet they were 90%. That would be the number I'd throw out. 90% understory coverage of forbs.
Yeah. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah. And it was mostly legumes and desirable plants. I think we just ran the witch plants episode. Every witch plant that we talked about, from desmodiums and lespedezas to bonesets, and like it was just forb dominance, and it was all the good forbs that you really want. It was already starting to flower, so it was really...
You look at it, and it's like our list. Like if we went down our list of top 10 plants for turkeys, those stands have it.
Yeah,
they embody it.
It was all like that. And I think I have some footage we'll cut in on YouTube from that particular stand I'm thinking of. But then I saw the same thing in some fields. And it's like, okay, like that, I wasn't expecting that from that herbicide, but one application got them to where they wanted to be, and now it's in maintenance mode.
Well, when I go to fields, I go to oftentimes, instead of an Arsenal plus Escort mix, oftentimes I'm going to a Plateau plus Escort mix in those scenarios. And I've gotten really good results from that.
Yeah, very good combination. That's the thing also, you're not getting in the mindset, oh, I'm going to always go back and do this over and over in this field. No, you're trying to get it over that hump.
It is not
a new stable place.
It is not an herbicide rotation.
Yes. You're trying to get it to a new stable place that is now a community of desirable plants that you can manage as desirable plants.
Yeah. There's so much I want to talk about here.
Well, that's good.
Shut up. This is very stimulating for me, because to circle back to something that we talked about a minute ago, is a lot of people have this herbicide hesitancy, we'll call it. And for example, I got an email from a listener probably year and a half, maybe even 2 years ago, who was questioning our recommendation of using herbicides for old field restoration to shape the plant community how we want it for turkeys, particularly for brooding cover.
Yeah, people got mad about that one.
Yeah, and this particular listener was questioning. He said, isn't there a lot of data that shows negative effects of glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup, on pollinator communities, insect communities? And I was honest with him. I said, I don't really know. I'm not familiar with that literature. Maybe there is some evidence that is the case in agronomic crops. I said, but the one thing that I can tell you for sure is that if I go out to a field that's dominated by exotic pasture grasses, I kill those using a chemical, whether it be glyphosate or something that's more appropriate for the particular species that are problematic in that area. Because oftentimes glyphosate isn't. Yeah. So like glyphosate, it's a good example in fescue, right? It's good for fescue, smooth brome. Those are two species that it targets really well. And I said, what I can tell you is if I go in and spray glyphosate on a field of tall fescue, and I get back a native early successional plant community, I have orders of magnitude more pollinators than I did when I just had the fescue.
Biomass, like pick your metric.
Exactly. So to me, and I probably overuse this phrase at this point, but it's cracking eggs to make an omelet. Sometimes you have to make a little bit of a mess, and sometimes you have to kill stuff that is that is valuable as a forage species or a cover species to get more of that. Sometimes you have to take a step back to take steps forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, and I feel this is not supposed to be an episode focused on herbicide, but I think it is one of the things that we are seeing a lot, and it's also one of those tools that people, fire could certainly be used in the same context to some degree. One of those that some people are hesitant to embark on. And, I've just seen people multiple times over again where they're just like, man, like I hear what you're saying and I'm trying to get there and I just can't get there.
Yeah.
Like I can't get the right stuff, especially in field management.
Yeah.
People are just like, it's just like a constant battle. All I have is a bunch of trash species. Like I just can't get there.
Yeah.
And it's usually, a suite of invasive plant species that they're trying to deal with. And, that's going to take some tweaking to an herbicide application to get past that problem a lot of the time.
And see, this is where I'm glad you brought this up, because there's a difference in learning because somebody told you and actually seeing it yourself. And Craig has been telling us, Craig Harper that is, for a long time, that the way to manage fallow fields for turkeys and other species of wildlife is to use herbicides judiciously to manipulate the existing seed bank, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, in contrast to planting something to be used for brooding cover. And that all made sense. And he published the paper and he showed that it was, 25% the cost to manage for native vegetation versus planting.
Powerful study.
Yeah, versus planting native warm season grasses and forbs. And that's all great. And I understood that at an intellectual level. But then you and I recently went to a property and we saw some fields that were planted into brooding cover that looked absolutely phenomenal. I mean, there were some of them that looked really good. And so that process, that experiential learning showed me, yes, it is possible to plant and have really good structure and species composition for turkeys. But the problem with that is inevitably, you're going to at some point have to use herbicides in that spot that kill the stuff that you paid to plant. And so what that ultimately results in, of course, is a cost.
Yeah.
And so because it's inevitable that you're going to have to kill that stuff, that is why Craig justifies, let's just manage what is there instead of bringing in plant material.
Well, and I would say if you're trying to plant a native suite of plants, it's so cost prohibitive for most people. It's, that makes it not feasible for a lot of people. But that we need to also acknowledge that's not everybody or every situation. But, in that same visit, at least I kind of felt in several situations, I was like, man, what's going on here? Like, they're not getting back what I would have expected from what they say they've done.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just, but then we see those planted fields and those were in really good structure. And those, at least the ones I'm thinking about, those were planted with a mix of native forbs. And we'll cut some footage in from that because I got a little bit from that too.
Yeah.
But another thing that has started growing on me some, and I'm planning actually now with the poult research, assuming I can keep the damn thing funded, which is not a certainty now, just for everybody out there, because of some of the stuff that's been happening with our funding mechanisms. 2 or 3 of the treatments that we're going to have are going to be plantings of agricultural stuff. Because I've seen some fields that are managed in ways that they're planting an agricultural crop, and that is contributing to the overall structure of the community, and they look pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And I have learned a lot about what poults need and what they're looking for and how they do effectively through all this, living with them as a poult mama. And that started to grow on me.
That's why that work is so valuable. One reason.
So now already that we're doing exactly what we're supposed to do as scientists, I think, is I've now observed this in multiple contexts with that background, hanging out with these poults. And I'm like, wait a minute now. We might be able to come up with a plot that we can manage really well for poultry and cover, and then also get added value that, it's going to peak in productivity during antler growth and lactation for deer.
Right.
It's all plants that they love.
Right.
I love doing that kind of work because that's what happens. I see problems and I get that observation, and now all of a sudden it's being integrated into our research program so we can get answers.
Yep.
And that's just one example. But since we were talking about planting stuff, I've seen some plantings and some management strategies with those plantings that are making me think there's something to this. We need to test it with poults.
I think that's a point of emphasis on why it's so important for you and I to continue to work with private landowners, is because that informs our research and lets us know what are the relevant questions that need to be asked that landowners need information on.
Yeah, and why I implore the audience to keep it coming. Like, show us stuff.
Yeah.
Send us, your pictures or whatever, your questions. All that stuff is going right back into what we are doing and how we're trying to, develop information and disseminate it and everything. So
right. Yeah. Yeah. So back to what we were talking about with the arsenal and the escort. I mean, that was something that really resonated with me starting several years ago when I was working with a landowner in South Carolina, actually, and their forester wanted to spray with that mixture. And at the time, I didn't have all this information and experience that we just went over. And I recommended holding the escort out to save the forbs. And, what they ended up with is a lot of blackberry after the spray, which you would expect. And we've already talked about. And in this particular part of the state, they also ended up with a lot of winged elm. And winged elm can be just as bad and problematic of a mid-story species as sweet gum. Sweet gum always catches the heat, but winged elm can be a pretty bad one too. And so that kind of started me down the journey, or down the pathway of looking into alternatives to arsenal-only mid-rotation herbicide applications. And then we initiated this research project that you alluded to a minute ago. And we looked
I wanted you to give us the results of that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we looked at vegetation responses in the understory to several different levels of thinning in loblolly pines, but then we also had secondary treatments, I'll refer to them as, that were focused on understory vegetation manipulation. So we had controls where we did nothing after thinning. We had fire-only treatments. We had herbicide-only treatments, and that was application of Arsenal plus Escort. And the reason that we ended up using that tank mix was because the timber company that we were working with typically uses that at mid-rotation, so that's the solution that they wanted to test. And I was hesitant about it at first because I didn't like that Escort addition, but my opinion on that has changed, as we'll get to in just a second.
Well, it's the same. You had the same impression I did. It's like,
yes,
that's supposed to be suppressing the desirable plants
that's
that
right.
we want.
Yeah. And then we had the herbicide application paired with fire. So go in, spray in late summer, and then the following winter we burned it, right? And that was the treatment where we ended up seeing the greatest coverage of forbs. It was over 80% coverage of forbs in the understory.
So you measured the coverage.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That, in my perception, I think I said it earlier, I would have said 90% coverage. So it lines up with what you actually measured.
Yeah,
pretty
that's
close.
Right. That's right. And there were some, and that's the average. So there were some stands that had over 100% understory coverage of forbs.
Can you do that? Sounds like some Alabama math.
Well, the reason that
over 100%.
The reason that it worked is we were doing point intercept vegetation sampling, and at some of those points, so basically for those that are unfamiliar with this approach, you've got like a little rod that you're dropping at predetermined points along a transect, and you're recording the plants that intersect with that rod, that little metal rod.
Yeah.
And in many cases, we would drop that metal rod in some of these stands that had been treated with Arsenal and Escort and then burned. And 2 years later, we would have a multi-layered canopy of forbs in the understory. So it's like you drop that rod and you hit a Lespedeza, and then a native Lespedeza species, and then you hit a ragweed, then you hit a partridge pea, and then you hit another species of native Lespedeza, and then you hit a beggar's lice species, like all at the same point. They're just all growing side by side.
Probably had that trailing Lespedeza or trailing Desmodium
up underneath. Yeah, exactly. And so that's how we exceeded 100% coverage, because you may drop that pin at 10 points along the transect and end up having, intersecting 40 different species of forbs at those 10 points.
You don't reckon there was any bugs in there to eat?
Golly. Yeah, what are you talking about? They were everywhere.
Good grief.
They were everywhere. That's what you're managing for. I tell people, think about it as you're trying to create a little understory forest for those poults to be running around through.
Yep. And those little jokers are little dinosaurs under there.
Mm-hmm.
Just running around, tearing up everything.
So, and so I'll add to this to kind of wrap this portion up about this particular research project. That was the most expensive treatment that we implemented. I mean, that on a per acre basis, applying that treatment plus fire is going to be very expensive. But if you compare it, and we did this in the paper, you look in the literature to others that have looked at arsenal only mid-rotation understory applications, and based on what we know about most wildlife species that use open pines and their habitat requirements and the species composition and structure that they are specifically focused on and prefer to be in, that arsenal plus Escort plus fire better achieved that condition than arsenal or arsenal with fire. And
I think another thing to remind people about is that's like an upfront cost, so to speak. Like you have a high upfront cost when that happened, but one of the stands was 3 years post, I think another one 5 years post.
Yeah.
That only happened once.
Yeah.
We're talking about they've implemented multiple prescribed fires again, and it's still what I would consider near ideal.
Well, that's the other thing that I love
to make it better.
That's the other thing that I love about a good mid-rotation woody control focused herbicide application is that I do feel like it frees you up a little bit in regards to your prescribed burning program, where you don't have to feel like you're being constantly held under the gunpoint of sweet gums coming back in if you let off the gas. Right. Once you have that sweet gum component controlled.
Yeah, that was an expensive intervention, but it gets less costly over time because you're not going in there and doing that all the time. You're doing it once, and then after, if you keep fire in the stands, especially one of the landowners is going to move all of that to fall burning, those stands where that happened, they're going to keep that forb dominance as long as they have enough sunlight, I think.
Right. And generally what I have started picking up on is I feel like when you apply an herbicide, if you pair it with fire afterwards, the fire helps mitigate some of the negative effects of the herbicide on species richness and diversity.
Yeah. I would say in this case it is even augmenting it.
Yes.
So like each is augmenting the other.
Yeah.
But certainly in most cases mitigating it. But I was going to say another thing that I've been like racking my brain over this, like what is going on here. But think about in some cases, it's not all the cases, but some cases when you add that mid-rotation arsenal and then you implement your burning, but it's all dormant season burning, both of those are kind of shifting it. You can end up with dominance by blackberry, but you often end up with dominance by a bunch of native warm season grasses.
Yeah, like broom sedge and little blue stem in particular.
Which aren't inherently bad. You just don't want to see a grass.
Yeah.
So then I go back to the Escort and was like, oh, like the blackberry and grass that would have come in and really taken over dominance, that was delayed, which allowed a lot of these forbs to get to colonize and get their place.
Mm-hmm.
And it, like now it starts to make sense how that could be.
Yeah.
So and I just wanted to emphasize the point that yes, a high upfront cost, but if you could keep that going for 15 years, then it's not that high of a cost compared to other things you might do.
Right. The one thing that I will throw out here, because I know that we do have a lot of listeners from the Deep South, is that the limitation of this technique is that it can't be used in longleaf.
Yeah, that's a good point. The Escort is not labeled to use in longleaf.
Right. And so as an interesting approach to that, I'm working with one particular landowner right now where I would have loved to use that cocktail on some of his understory. But because it's longleaf, it's not an option. So we had to go with Garlon instead. And what's the problem with Garlon? It leads to grass dominance. A lot of times it leads to grass dominance when you apply it at mid-rotation.
Earlier, when you said looking for alternatives to the wing down, that was exactly what came into my head.
Yeah,
it's like, the Garlon.
So we're going to try something in those stands where he did the understory mid-rotation Garlon application. And we're going to come back and we're going to start that stand on a fall burn rotation to try to overcome some of that positive grass response and try to reduce the grass over time and encourage forbs. Yeah. I still think it was needed because he really needed to get control of his sweet gum, and he had a bunch of beautyberry in the understory too that had exceeded the coverage that I would like to see. I don't mind a little bit of beautyberry and sweet gum, but you don't want a ton of it. And I'm going to be excited to see where we can push that with fire seasonality too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'll be really interesting to see. I'm just thinking about from a holistic standpoint, I guess. Sort of like what you described with, okay, we're starting with a sod forming grass, and we're going to break a few eggs, and there could be negative effects of that. But like, do you want a field in that case, or a forest stand to basically not serve any value, or do you want to break the egg and get your omelet, like you put it? And like the diversity of, pick your guild or your sweetest species, like the diversity that responds to that you can maintain in long term.
Right.
That like looking at those stands, and they're like a carpet of flowers with pollinators zooming everywhere, and
it has that added benefit of being pretty to look at.
Yeah. Like one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen.
Yeah.
So, I think that's important. Keep at the forefront of our mind.
Absolutely. There was another thing that I wanted to bring up today that Craig and I encountered during that field tour that we did recently. And that is, because, one of the things you and I talk a lot about is expanding your burn season, right?
Yeah.
And not just to burning during times of the year other than winter to shape vegetation, but also just to have that rest of the year available to accomplish your acreage that you need to. Because, going back to that property that we talked about a little while ago, that was one of their biggest challenges, is to get all their uplands that need to be burned that are in the rotation accomplished every year. That's very challenging if you're only doing it in February and March, right?
Yeah.
So building out from that, it's been interesting to me because I've encountered a number of folks, of managers and landowners and hunters this summer that have this perception that growing season fire is more intense or more dangerous than dormant season fire.
Yeah.
And in my experience, in most cases, it's actually the opposite. And
I would agree with that.
In fact, I have had more jumps, more spotting, more fire escapes, higher intensity than I would prefer on winter burns than I have
Mhm.
on growing season burns.
Yeah. I have experienced that. Landowners that I have worked with that have expanded their burn season, I commonly ask them about their perception,
Mm-hmm.
and I get that very commonly.
Yeah.
And then, the other added thing in some places, like for example, met with a couple of Alabama landowners recently, and all of them have said something along these lines. Well, we got a burn ban during that,
Yeah.
that late summer window most of the time anyway, and
Yeah.
like I might set the whole county on fire if I try to burn. Yeah, we're avoiding that.
We
Right?
don't burn during droughts. Yeah.
Yeah, you're trying to avoid the conditions and also use firing techniques to manage it. And that I think, although I don't think the data is very strong to support this, I don't know, this common belief. We'll just say, yeah, if you're burning in the fall and it's warmer than it would be in your winter burn or early growing season burn, and you get fire intensity high enough so that you're scorching the canopy and the pines, that's probably going to be harder on the pines than it would have been at a different time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But you're trying to avoid that through selecting conditions to burn in where you can manage the fire intensity, and then use firing techniques to try to avoid scorching the canopy. Like that's not
right.
It's explicitly your objective not to do that.
Yeah.
You don't want to scorch the canopy. So yeah, the pines could be more vulnerable to scorch at that time, although I'm not real confident in the data that's been collected on that, but it's definitely a belief. And I hear anecdotes from people showing, where the fire got away and it was hard on the pines.
Yeah.
But you're trying to avoid that.
But
so
what's funny about that is if you go out there and you just take a random sample of stands that have crown scorch and prescribed fire associated mortality in them, most of them were probably burned during the wintertime.
Yeah.
You can scorch and kill the shit out of trees during the wintertime.
Yeah, you can definitely do that. But you're not trying to.
You're not.
Most time. Sometimes maybe you're wanting a little.
Well, sometimes you may be trying to burn some trees on purpose. I mean, that definitely can be an objective, but
most of the time it's not within the objectives of folks that I'm interacting with. So yeah, that's something. We've touched on it a bunch, but I'd always recommend to landowners. I think you and I we obviously get a lot out of tinkering with stuff. Like that's our whole job, really.
Yeah.
Some directed tinkering. But
the difference in us and piddlers is we just keep really good records of what happens when we
keep
piddle.
Notes and maybe we're a little more deliberate about it sometimes. But I encourage that with landowners, and I usually, especially with this happens with almost all of them. If they're burning already, they're almost always doing it in the dormant season, or late dormant season, early growing season time frame. That March.
And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with burning during the dormant season. That's still
I'm glad they're hitting their fire turning.
That's still when I'm trying to accomplish the bulk of my acreage most of the time.
Yeah. Most of the time, we're not there yet, but sometimes they are already there. They're hitting their acreage and they're doing it mostly there. And we're talking about how challenging it is, or they're trying to meet some other objectives better with their burning or tweak it, and we talk about expanding the burn window. And I always encourage landowners, like, don't just go all in and start doing it everywhere.
Yeah.
Find a block that's easy for you to burn, that you've got really good brakes on, it's really easy to control, you don't have any concern about it, and start out small and slow. Like pick conditions and, go in there and burn that 10 acres in mid-October. And see how you like it. Watch the vegetation respond. See, did you encounter anything unexpected? And get that experience and get comfortable with it before you start trying to do that on 50 or 100 acre blocks like you might in February or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the thing is unless it's really dry and windy, because all the vegetation still has such high moisture compared to wintertime. And generally speaking, the humidity does not get as low during the growing season, that kind of keeps a cap on the intensity.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, as long as you're not burning after a significant prolonged period of lack of rainfall, or,
well, if you burn and it hasn't rained in 2 months and it's 30-mile-an-hour gusts, and like, yeah, we can set up a scenario where we can burn the whole place down.
Yeah.
But you're not doing that, on purpose.
Yes.
You're trying to avoid that at all costs, obviously, just like you would any other time. You're using the technique or the practice responsibly. Right. So I will say, though, I always recommend that because I think it's great for landowners to start there, or land managers to start there and kind of build confidence, get comfortable before they start trying to eat a bigger piece of the elephant.
Yeah, I totally agree. And even if they're just starting out burning, do it that way.
Yeah, same
if
way.
They have no burning experience.
And we could apply this to whatever other practice. Like, don't just go do it everywhere and then realize, oh crap, I hate what just happened. I don't like it. So you could apply it across the board for a lot of different things. But I will say, in terms of the burning, I can't think of one example where they have done that and incorporated the fall burning into their repertoire and gotten comfortable and then rolled that into normal operations, and then they come back and be like, man, I hate that.
Yeah,
I'm not doing that anymore.
Same here. I have nobody.
Everyone has been the opposite, where they're like, I've got to figure out a way to incorporate more of this into my
Right. Absolutely. That's been my experience as well. The other thing I've noticed a lot this summer is it seems like folks are starting to understand the importance of getting rid of sod-forming pasture grasses. But what isn't always easy and seems to present a challenge to a lot of them is the proper way to apply the herbicides to get the most effective control. And that can be a little bit of a challenge as well.
Yes. Well, and also, just to add a little bit, and this is something that you and I are continuing to do because we're seeing it in so many contexts now. It isn't magic. Like, you have a unique situation and you need to read. Like, sometimes you go in and kill the fescue or the bahia or whatever, and you just get everything you wanted from it, and it's just there. But I find more often you kind of pull the blanket off, and then there's a bunch of other little problems that you have to work with, and it takes a little
fields are the
while.
worst. Fields are always the worst.
Yes, fields are, but you have to tinker around with it and figure out what's going to work in your context to get where you're trying to go. And sometimes that takes a couple of years and some tinkering.
Yep. One of the fields that I'm the most proud of, that I've personally sprayed and managed over time, I started out with a blanket of bahia grass, and then we got a ton of foxtail back after that, which having some foxtail isn't a bad deal, but you don't want a monotypic stand of it either. And then I got some of the foxtail out of the way, and then I had a bad Bermuda problem, and then I also had a perennial I also had a ryegrass problem every year in that same field. And man, I'll tell you, like, there were a couple times I wanted to give up, but I stuck with it, and I'm really happy with the point that I've gotten the field to over time. But it's just, for whatever reason, fields are really difficult. I think a lot of it is having a history of seeds being introduced unintentionally on equipment, and then sometimes, they've been intentionally even planted in some of those species. And so you're dealing with that legacy.
Yeah. Unfortunately so. But we, both of us and others are actively trying to tackle this, because I keep getting introduced to new contexts.
Right.
Where it's like, okay, we got to figure out how to deal with this because it's affecting a lot of landowners.
Right.
And so I don't know if I've told you about this, but Dwayne Elmore and I have put together an idea for a project, and we're going to start moving forward this fall. That's field management, more in that brood field context.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically with the ryegrass issue, and he's got some interesting perspectives on it. And I think back a lot of the time when I'm seeing this ryegrass issue, it's in fields that are being dissed at the time you'd plant a fall food plot.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to look at the timing of disking, combined with different ways of like herbicide approaches to start the field off, specifically trying to get rid of ryegrass and encourage a native forb community. Not this planted. I'm talking about completely native forb that just responding to our.
That's going to be really good information. And I've got an undergraduate student right now, Ryan Tyson, who is tackling, I don't know, it's kind of a related objective to that, where he's doing some ryegrass control using clethodim in clover food plots and looking at the biomass of forage production in areas where ryegrass is controlled versus where it's not. And then he's also looking at intensity of use by deer and turkey. So I think that'll be some really good information too.
Yes.
And the reason I wanted the biomass info is because, especially like, you take deer hunters that may or may not turkey hunt, may not be interested in providing that brooding cover in that field. But if you can show them that it doubles their forage biomass production, well, they're going to do it. It's going to benefit them. It's going to benefit their deer, but then it's also going to benefit turkeys, even though that wasn't their objective.
Yeah. We work with landowners to meet their objectives, and hopefully we get something good for turkeys.
That's right.
For our own little pet objective. Well, most of them I work with, they're turkeys anyway. But a lot of this stuff benefits multiple species,
right?
And I think holistically, both of us are about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Generally benefiting our native wildlife species.
Yep.
Well, any other thoughts or things that we need to discuss? I think
those are most of the things that I had in mind. We've been all over the place, but I was excited to get into a lot of that because that was some, I feel like very relevant stuff that people could go out and apply in the near future.
Yeah, I don't want to do it in this episode, and I'm hesitant to say anything because I don't want us to get on
you're going to stimulate
tangent on it, but I think we need to revisit some stuff with property design and scale of management, and scale of management in terms of like how big of units are we managing for these different things, and then how far are they apart? How are we trying to arrange them? That kind of stuff. I really think it would be good because we've both been doing that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my perspective at least has changed some on that and how I've been thinking about it through, several of these recent visits and things that we've been doing. So, I think it'd be a good idea.
Yeah, I think so too.
You know what I just thought of too? We got in about a month, we're going to all be together. We've got some other folks that have a really strong expertise in this area.
Right.
We ought to pick their brain about it.
Yeah, that'd be good.
On the horn.
That'd be good. Let's do it.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, I hope everybody out there enjoyed this. We're trying to keep it relevant to the time of the year, but also to what people in our audience say they care about. And I would say habitat is definitely number one on that, property management.
Yeah.
So I'll remind folks, we have other resources available. We've got that online course we can link that I think is really great. Will contributed some really good stuff in that. So did a lot of other great scientists. Some of them, many of them you've heard from on here. We've got several upcoming events. I am trying to fundraise to keep some of the work that we're doing. So we'll link some of that stuff.
Why don't you go ahead and give a shout out on that? When is the date of your fundraiser that you've got coming up?
Yeah, so we're having a banquet on the 23rd of August.
Yeah.
And
2 days before I start jury duty.
Well, darn. Yeah, so that is a general fundraiser
August
that we're
23rd
doing to support,
and that's in Gainesville, Florida. Yeah.
Yeah. and we've got an Eventbrite and stuff, and we've gotten a ton of support. We've got tons of organizations and individuals who have contributed stuff for auctions, and I mean, we've got a lot of really fun stuff planned for that.
Mm-hmm.
But the funds, like, we're going to have to get into a funding model that includes the general public, I think, to be sustainable over the long term. And this is kind of our first go with that, to start fundraising to try to be able to do the kinds of work we were just talking about. It's really hard to get funding to do field management. Like, it's just hard to do that.
Yeah.
And it's not a good model. And we're looking at some other ways to do this. So, I'd encourage folks, if you're
things are changing, man. All my research right now is funded by NGOs and private landowners.
Well, the thing is that, and I really I value that a lot.
Yeah.
I don't mean to diminish that. And so do I with the state agency, but the funding landscape has changed.
It has.
Substantially. So we just can't do it at the level that we need to get what the information we want to folks. And it's hard to target the questions when you have, other objectives in the mix.
Right.
So
we've talked about this before. Yeah.
So, and the NGOs, I mean, for me, obviously Turkeys for Tomorrow's helped us a lot and are, sponsoring the podcast, but, I'm getting funding from them and from the National Wild Turkey Federation and from, recently the Low Country Game Bird Foundation has started contributing. Like, those are tremendous, and they're the base for what I'm doing, but we still need more to really do the kind of work that I want to deliver to people. So, that's kind of why people are seeing those pop up. Like, we're trying to figure out a sustainable way to keep going and keep addressing the kinds of questions that we want to. So I know not everybody's in the Gainesville area. There's still ways for you to contribute if you want to contribute. We have, you can donate directly, or we have online auctions and things that are going to go on that some really cool items will be in. So there's lots of ways that folks can contribute if you feel so inclined. But we're trying to be visionary, I guess, so to speak, and figure out a path forward where we can keep bringing the level of science and information to people that we want to.
Yep.
So,
yeah, exciting and nerve-wracking times at this,
Oh yeah.
Concurrent.
Yep.
The only other thing I've got, I committed the other day, we're going to be doing another landowner field tour October 2nd. I think TFT is going to be sponsoring that one. And it's going to be in the Auburn area, somewhere nearby here. It's not all nailed down yet. It hadn't been announced online, but just got that nailed down earlier this week. So October 2nd, East Alabama area, there will be a landowner field day.
So you're going to do it? Is there anybody else?
Yeah, I'm going to do it. Craig Harper's going to be there too, it looks like. So, and it's going to be all apparently from what I've heard so far, it's going to be on a tract of land that's managed pretty well. So we're going to have hopefully a lot of good demonstration areas to show what's been done, particularly with forest management. It's going to have a lot of focus on forest management and particularly pine systems.
Yeah. Good stuff. Yep. Well, we really appreciate everybody's support, and we're going to keep going.
Excited to be back.
Glad to get another episode under our belt.
Yeah, I feel reinvigorated after that little break. I'm excited about getting back on it.
Well, leave us some comments. Let us know what we missed. What do you want us to talk about? Things that we need to cover in more detail. What you disagree with, whatever you want to leave. We appreciate the feedback.
We're stupid.
And all the support.
Thanks, y'all.
Yep, appreciate it.
Wild Turkey Science is part of the Natural Resources University podcast network and is made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow, a grassroots organization dedicated to the wild turkey. To learn more about TFT, check out turkeysfortomorrow.org.